Hello and welcome to EDHREC's Upping the Average, where we take a commander's average deck list as compiled by the data on EDHREC and make some quick swaps to it to help take it from a good start to a great one. The commander we're discussing today definitely proves that there's always a method to your madness. Anje Falkenrath, or as I like to call her, Miss Anje, is currently the most popular Rakdos commander, though Prosper Tomebound is hot on her heels. She's a 3-mana 1/3 Rummager with haste, but every time she discards a Madness card, she untaps herself, allowing us to discard through several Madness cards in a single turn. Predictably, Miss Anje's EDHREC page is full of mad madness. I only spot like 2 cards in her high synergy and top card sections that don't have that keyword on them. Miss Anje's about to become a Maid of Dishonor in the upcoming Crimson Vow set, but before she attends to her wedding responsibilities, let's get to know the good old classic Falkenrath. We'll use the average deck feature on EDHREC to get a list and import it to the Architect deck building website. As always in this series, any swaps we make to the average list must either keep the total price of the deck cost neutral, or else help lower the overall cost of the deck. Right off the bat, Anje Falkenrath presents us with a dazzling and dizzying array of cards. There are, at present, 43 cards with the Madness ability in her deck, and arguably, she doesn't actually care all that much about them. Like, a lot of them are really cool cards, especially some of the ones that we got from Modern Horizons 2. But to Anje, Madness has a very specific and different type of utility. However, we can't talk about any of that until we talk about this big baddie right here, World Gorger Dragon. Anje Falkenrath is infamous for being one of the greatest facilitators of the World Gorger Dragon combo, and real quick, here's a quick run through on how the combo works. With the dragon in the graveyard, cast Animate Dead to bring it back to the battlefield. It enters, and the trigger will go on the stack to exile all our permanents. Before that trigger resolves, we can tap all of our remaining lands for mana. Then, when that trigger resolves, the Animate Dead will be exiled, which means that the World Gorger Dragon will be sacrificed. And when it goes away, all the exiled stuff comes back. That includes Animate Dead, which can bring the dragon right back again. Lather, rinse, repeat, and we're going infinite. Since our lands repeatedly come back into play untapped, we can tap them for mana each time they come back, meaning that we can accrue infinite mana. There are several different ways to win the game after causing this loop, or even to win while causing this loop. But the salient point here is that there's a version of this deck that is extremely combo-centric, and revolves entirely around the World Gorger. The current configuration of this average deck contains some of those win condition options, not to mention some extra tutors to help locate the dragon and alternate reanimation cards that help get things kicked off more easily. To bring things back around to Miss Anje, she's a great facilitator for this combo because she's A, a discard outlet that can put the dragon right into the graveyard, and B, she can churn through her deck extremely quickly to locate those combo pieces. This is why she doesn't necessarily have to care that much about the Madness cards in her deck. She just chucks a card, draws a card, untaps, then discards another, draws another, untaps, and zooms through her whole deck to find the pieces and kick off a win. To pull back the curtain a little, I think this might be one of the most divided decks on the website. Almost exactly half of Anje players are making use of the World Gorger Dragon combo, which of course forces the deck towards a very specific build path. And the other half of Anje players are not using the combo, which tends the deck in a completely different strategic direction. That means before we can make any upgrades, we have to make a choice about which of these paths we want to take. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to go down the route of no World Gorger Dragon combo. I actually think it's a really cool combo, but in this case, the deciding factor was honestly that 51% of players are not using the World Gorger Dragon, and 51%, that's technically the majority. Plus, Anje decks that lean into the combo trend towards the higher end of the power level spectrum, including competitive EDH, which I think might be a little beyond the scope of an Upping the Average series. And even beyond that, I would just hate to give bad deck advice because I'm not familiar with a certain style of play. So I'd really recommend checking out other voices that are more familiar with CEDH if you're interested in a combo-oriented version of an Anje Falkenrath deck. Also, since I enforced that budget cap for this series where we aren't allowed to increase the overall cost of the deck, I think I'd potentially be missing out on some of the key cards that make the most optimized version of Anje so exciting in the first place. There are budget versions of the competitive Anje deck for sure. And there's also really great budget version of this strategy, which is what I'm really excited to talk about. So let's get upgrading. Normally I break the upgrades into 3 sections, but for this deck, there's only one section that matters. Miss Anje, Miss Anje, Miss Anje. Listen, I tried to stop. Like, really, I tried to commit to saying Anya instead of Angie, and it just comes out sometimes. It's a reflex. I don't know what to say. And if it drives you mad, in my defense, it is a madness deck. First things first, let's get affiliated with the most important cards in the deck when pursuing a non-combo Anje strategy. It's important to note that even this version of the deck doesn't always care about casting madness spells. There are some we'll be happy to have in a pinch for sure, but we're still happy to use them as discard fodder for the excellent effects like Bone Miser, Glinthorn Buccaneer, and Archfiend of Ifnir. This is a delightful direction to take the deck, picking off our enemies through the sheer advent of just discarding cards. Some, like the Faith of the Devoted, do take extra mana to make this happen, but they can still be pretty potent if we time things correctly. Squee is also a fan favorite, constantly returning to hand so we can discard him over and over and over. And if we run into a stripe of non-madness cards that halt our engine, a few wheel effects or a Shadow of the Grave will help us jumpstart our engines all over again. Special shout out to Prosper Tomebound too, by the way. Madness cards technically go into a temporary exile zone for us to cast them, which means we'll trigger Prosper's ability to create treasure tokens, and that's really fun. To begin the upgrades, we first have to remove all the combo-centric cards in the deck. The Dragon and the Reanimating Enchantments will be in the wings for now. We'll also say goodbye to Entomb, since its primary function was to go and find that World Gorger Dragon and plop it right into the graveyard. I'm also going to cut the Dark Ritual now too, since that card is more closely associated with the tempo of the combo version of the deck. Since we lost a mana source just there, I'll increase the land count by 1. I'd like to include a Canyon Slough, because it's a dual land that also has a self-discard element, which could trigger one of our many discard payoffs. This brings us to 33 lands, which compared to other EDH decks is very, very low. However, for Anje, I think 33 is kind of a lot. Whether you're playing combo or not, Anje cycles through tons of cards really, really quickly, and usually only gets stopped when she runs out of madness cards to discard and draws too many lands. Again, this is why cards like Shadow of the Past or Wheel Effects can be so powerful in this deck. They give us another shot at continuing the discard train even if our hand is mana flooded. I think 33 lands, 1/3 of the deck, is a decent number that will make sure we have enough lands to reliably cast Anje on time, and after that, she will single-handedly help smooth out our ability to find more mana sources. Oh, and you know what? Since we're updating a few lands, how about we take these 2 lands here and upgrade them a bit too? Unless you're playing Landfall or top deck manipulation that needs shuffle effects, I don't love these in 2-color decks. If a land is there to fix my colors and it enters tapped, I'd usually prefer that it give me both of my colors rather than just one of my colors. In this case though, I think we can exchange these 2 for some much needed utility lands. There's no Bajuka Bog in this deck yet, and I think we'd be extremely well served to include one. I also want to give a land slot to the delightfully funny Emergent Zone, which gives us a one-time flash effect. Since our commander has haste, this is actually really sneaky powerful. When our opponent's defenses are down, we can crack this land, flash in our commander, and get discarding right away when they least expect it. Fun stuff, but there's another aspect to the mana I want to address here too. I'm going to quickly exchange this here Locket for a Mind Stone, which I like a little bit better for its ability to be cast on turn 2, since Anje herself will occupy our 3rd turn most of the time. And as much as possible, I like to curate our mana acceleration around our commander's place on the mana curve. Glancing around, I'd also like to make a cut on Nightmare Unmaking, which came in Anje's original precon. Maybe it's just me, but I've never been particularly impressed with it. Exile is cool, but the restriction makes it very hit or miss. I'd feel a whole lot safer with a more reliable board wipe, namely a Blasphemous Act, which has the added benefit of being a whole lot cheaper to cast. This next swap is an optional Metacall. I love Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast spells because they are really funny blowouts. I have a sneaking suspicion that this one appears in the average deck because it's such an efficient piece of interaction in the high power version of the combo Anje deck. It's a very good card for sure, but I wonder if this version of the deck that we're working on might be better served with a Tybalt's Trickery instead. Higher power decks may even want both, to be honest. I think there's a large meta call happening here. For our version of the deck that we're working on here, we just might want an interactive spell that helps against the popular white and green and black and red removal spells that could come our commander's way too. And compared to some of the other defensive Rakdos cards out there, this is a decently cheap card that will help us protect what's ours. Those are some minor quality of life tweaks, but now it's time for the fun stuff. This card has not been officially released yet, but it's coming up in Crimson Vow. The new Change of Fortune spell is so deliciously good for Anje. And by the way, don't be surprised if when I add this card in, it shows up red in the deck list. At the time of recording, this card isn't officially released, so it will show up as not technically legal yet. But there's no way I'm not gonna add this card to this deck, because Miss Anje is so excited to get her fangs on it. Change of Fortune, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's challenge. And man, the discard pain train just gets better and better. That Glinthorn Buccaneer can't carry us to a win all on its own. He needs helpers that will deal even more damage when we go down a huge discarding marathon. So Brawlin will also help deal damage as we discard cards. And Psychosis Crawler will punish enemies as we draw new replacements. Oh, and I know it's probably cliche of me to add in my favorite card, but Conrad would really enjoy life at the Falkenrath Manor. A lot of the madness cards we're discarding are creatures, so if he witnesses their discarding or watches them flip in and out of the graveyard, he will churn out tons more damage. Any one of these cards in play is enough to scare our opponents, but if we can assemble 2 of them on the battlefield, our discard pain train will eliminate enemies in short order. In fact, you know what? To help this out, I'm actually going to exchange just a small number of inconsequential madness spells for some inconsequential madness creatures. There are a lot of useful non-creature madness cards that we can make use of in a pinch, and we definitely want to keep those in case we end up needing them. But I think these 3 cards here are the ones that we're least likely to need or to use for their madness effects. I'm going to exchange them for these madness creatures, which we again might not necessarily need and probably won't ever even cast, but they have some bonus synergy for Conrad to witness them hitting the graveyard. That's not the only reason I'm increasing the creature count though. I'm making one more change to the deck, one that also rewards us for having extra creatures. I removed these single target reanimation cards earlier because they were really combo heavy. But that doesn't mean I'm removing all the reanimation. No. I'm gonna take this here Grimoire of the Dead, which came in the Anje precon, and I'm gonna swap it out for a different spell that will give us a much more immediate benefit. Anje is already a good enough discard enabler on her own, and the payoff on the Grimoire is just really slow. So I'm sorry, my dear, but you are up for elimination. And the card I'm gonna swap it with? Y'all already know. It's Living Death. All those madness creatures we've been tossing into the yard, yeah, they're back. And there are so many of them that even if they're a little bit funky, they're still gonna be a little bit lethal. The Living End archetype is my personal favorite modern deck, and there is no way that we're going to pass up on the opportunity to emulate that deck in this amazing discardy EDH deck too. And by the by, Living Death is especially spicy with that there Revolutionist that we already have in the deck list. Okay, that ought to do it. Here we have an extremely budget-friendly Rakdos discard deck that's sure to drive our opponents mad. You can find a link to the list in the description below with the cuts in the maybe board. I hope you've enjoyed the Falkenrath madness, and if you have any other recommendations you'd like to share with your fellow vampires, make sure you leave your suggestions in the comments below. Now, sashay away. Miss Anje.